I stared at the two matching oversized leather suitcases resting on the polished hardwood of my expensive downtown apartment foyer. The heavy wheels left faint parallel tracks in the dust. My mother stood by the front door with her hand tightly gripping the brass knob. She looked at me with an expression of performative exhaustion and deep fabricated maternal grief. She told me I was a severe and emotional burden. She said my rigidly structured lifestyle was completely suffocating her delicate creative spirit. She was moving to Sedona with a man named Robert. He was a visionary entrepreneur who supposedly understood her fragile soul. She did not mention the exact $14,250. I just paid to clear her federal back taxes. My name is Silas Vance, a 29-year-old man. I live in Austin, Texas. I am a lead supply chain data analyst and enterprise resource planning structural software architect. I design automated logistics systems for multinational industrial manufacturing firms. I optimize complex relational databases to eliminate extensive systemic waste. My job is to find deep inefficiencies and ruthlessly cut them out. My mother is named Helen. She is exactly 51 and identifies as a freelance holistic spiritual wellness consultant. She generates zero taxable income while thriving on manufactured chaos. She loudly declared she could no longer endure the heavy burden of my toxic energy. I felt my resting heart rate remain at a perfectly steady 65 beats per minute. I did not raise my voice or shed a tear. I simply analyzed the absolute mathematical hypocrisy of her statement. I was paying the $2,850, $50 monthly rent for this apartment. I personally funded her $640 monthly organic local grocery deliveries and maintained the master administrative access to her digital ecosystem. Where were you at 2:14 p.m. on a blistering Tuesday afternoon? I was standing silently in my own dark hallway. I was watching my mother walk out of my life while secretly driving a vehicle registered entirely in my name. She thought she was finally escaping a prison of my making. She did not realize she was merely unplugging herself from my financial mainframe. Robert honked his car horn twice. She pulled the heavy door shut behind her without looking back. The sudden silence in the apartment was mathematically perfect. I walked to the digital thermostat and lowered the temperature. The internal cooling fans immediately kicked on in the dark. My mother never understood the basic mechanics of input and output. She treated my financial resources like an infinite inventory repository that required no strategic replenishment. Over the past 7 years, she launched exactly 9 failed holistic business ventures. I functioned as her silent and uncompensated angel investor for every single catastrophic idea. She routinely demanded capital injections to fund her crystal healing workshops and organic aura cleansing retreats. I catalogued these demands in a centralized master data management portal. I tracked her total historical deficit to a staggering and unacceptable $114,890, $22 over time. She met Robert during a 3-day silent meditation retreat in Taos. He claimed to be a visionary architect of sustainable bamboo yoga studio franchises. In reality, he was a serial grifter with a trail of dissolved limited liability companies. She immediately intertwined her fragile identity with his grandiose entrepreneurial delusions. She began siphoning my logistics expertise to draft his supply chain manifests. She told me I was finally doing something spiritually meaningful with my cold and calculated brain. I spent 40 hours mapping international freight routes for his imported organic bamboo flooring. I optimized his entire vendor procurement strategy to save him exactly $18,450 in shipping tariffs. They repaid my extensive unseen labor with a continuous stream of psychological manipulation. Helen frequently told her friends that my corporate job was destroying my soul. She weaponized my technical success against me at every available opportunity. She claimed my deep focus on enterprise resource planning made me fundamentally incapable of human love. Robert nodded along with her toxic assessments while simultaneously drinking my imported $45.00 coffee. He utilized my proprietary forecasting algorithms to secure a massive commercial loan for his flagship studio. They believed I was a captive and completely docile resource node. They foolishly assumed my deep sense of familial obligation would completely prevent any sudden structural withdrawal. Helen thought her dramatic exit to Sedona was a victorious declaration of ultimate personal freedom. She failed to comprehend that her entire existence was completely subsidized by my automated payroll deductions. She walked away from the only stable supply chain she ever possessed. She confidently left me totally alone with my physical servers and my pristine relational databases. I sat at my polished glass desk and opened my main administrative console. I finally felt the heavy and suffocating burden of her chaotic inventory completely lifting from my personal ledger. Helen drove away in a pristine silver 2023 Subaru Outback. She considered the vehicle to be her personal spiritual vessel. She did not comprehend the harsh realities of automotive financing. I held the primary vehicle title in my secure fireproof safe. I also installed a commercial fleet management telematics module directly under the dashboard. It was a standard hardware diagnostic tool I frequently used for logistics testing. It broadcasted her exact GPS coordinates and engine diagnostics to my private server every 30 seconds. I could clearly see her current speed was 70 miles an hour on Interstate 35. Robert believed his new bamboo yoga studio was a totally independent empire. He completely ignored the complex digital scaffolding keeping his business upright. I built his entire enterprise resource planning system completely from scratch. This central software tracked every single bamboo mat and organic yoga block in his active inventory. I integrated his supplier database using my own enterprise application programming interface keys. An API key is simply a secure digital passport that allows different software programs to communicate. Without my specific developer credentials, his entire international procurement portal would instantly go totally blind. His master supplier in Vietnam required a continuous letter of credit to release the massive shipping containers. I quietly backed this vital financial instrument using my own secondary bank collateral. It was exactly $42,500 of completely invisible corporate leverage. Robert actually assumed his visionary charm secured the expensive international freight release. He did not know a bill of lading always requires cold hard cash to process. I managed the complicated customs brokerage fees exclusively through my personal corporate accounts. I paid exactly $1,214.88 just last week to successfully clear a delayed shipment of imported incense. They took this massive technical infrastructure entirely for granted every single day. They genuinely believed that complex supply chain management magically resolved itself through pure positive energy. My central administrative logistics dashboard glowed very brightly in the quiet and empty apartment. I carefully watched the blinking blue dot of the Subaru slowly inching toward the distant Texas border. I held absolute root access to Robert and his entire fraudulent business model. I possessed the master digital switches for their physical transportation and their commercial inventory. They called me a toxic burden while actively using my mechanical lungs to breathe. My quiet arsenal was fully stocked and perfectly primed for an immediate systemic deployment. I initiated the comprehensive resource withdrawal protocol at exactly 4:15 p.m. on Thursday. I opened my centralized financial management console and located the active automotive insurance policy. The silver Subaru Outback required a $245, $50 monthly premium to remain legally compliant on the highway. I clicked the termination module and permanently cancelled the comprehensive coverage, effective immediately. I then accessed the State Department of Motor Vehicles digital portal. I officially revoked the active vehicle registration under my primary name. I filed a standard suspended status report to flag the specific license plate in the national database. She was now driving a completely uninsured and unregistered liability across state lines. I monitored the live satellite tracking feed as she crossed the dusty border into New Mexico. She had absolutely no idea her vehicle was legally compromised. Next, I systematically dismantled the logistical backbone of the Bamboo Yoga franchise. I logged directly into the Enterprise Resource Planning Cloud server. I navigated to the core integration settings and located my active application programming interface keys. These specific digital passports allowed his inventory system to communicate with the overseas suppliers. I permanently revoked the access tokens and deleted the complex routing configurations. A routing configuration is simply a direct automated line of communication between two distinct applications. His entire automated procurement portal instantly went completely blind. The system could no longer track his incoming shipments or process his automated vendor payments. The artificial intelligence forecasting module collapsed without my live data feed. He was now completely locked out of his own theoretical corporate empire. The most critical structural failure required a direct intervention with my secondary banking institution. I accessed the secure commercial lending portal to manage the active international freight release. I officially withdrew my personal collateral backing the $42,500, $0 letter of credit. I submitted a formal cancellation of the financial guarantee to the master supplier in Vietnam. The automated maritime logistics system immediately flagged his 4 incoming shipping containers. They were instantly placed on a hard customs hold at the busy port of Los Angeles. The physical bamboo inventory was now legally frozen and accumulating massive daily port storage fees. His grand spiritual vision was completely neutralized by a simple banking withdrawal. He could not claim the expensive merchandise without providing a massive cash replacement immediately. I concluded the administrative purge by targeting the remaining localized domestic subsidies. I permanently deleted the automated $640 monthly organic grocery delivery profile. I removed my authorized credit card from her expensive holistic wellness subscription boxes. I spent exactly 50 minutes meticulously severing every single operational tie to their parasitic existence. I systematically deleted the localized user profiles from my highly secure internal network. I watched the final system processes execute flawlessly on my dual-curved monitors. I did not feel a single trace of guilt or hesitation during the entire lengthy procedure. I simply reallocated my newly liberated financial resources back into my primary investment portfolio. The quiet severance was officially executed with perfect mathematical precision. The first digital alarm sounded at exactly 9:14 a.m. on Friday morning. Robert encountered a fatal server timeout on his master procurement dashboard. He attempted to process a $4,250, $0 payment for imported meditation cushions. The enterprise programming interface rejected his localized credentials instantly. The automated log generated bright red diagnostic codes. He sent me an urgent text message. He demanded I reboot the integration software immediately. He claimed a minor technical glitch was stalling his enterprise. I archived his message without a single keystroke of reply. A revoked security token is never a simple glitch. It is a permanent digital eviction. 4 hours later, the systemic failure reached the physical supply chain. The customs authority issued a formal localized detention notice. His 4 containers of organic bamboo flooring were officially impounded. The maritime logistics system demanded an immediate wire transfer of $42,500 to release the frozen freight. Robert left a frantic voicemail on my secure secondary line at 1:42 p.m. He was no longer using his calm and measured yogic voice. He was breathing heavily and shouting into the cellular receiver. He ordered me to reinstate the expensive letter of credit. He threatened to sue me for extreme corporate sabotage if I refused. Helen experienced her own cascading operational failure at a luxury spa in Santa Fe. She attempted to charge a $345, $0 or a cleansing session to my platinum card. The point-of-sale terminal declined the transaction instantly due to the deactivated account status. She sent me a profoundly manipulative and dramatized audio message. She was weeping loudly while claiming I was deliberately starving her delicate spiritual energy. She demanded a direct cash transfer of $1,500 for her immediate desert survival needs. She completely ignored the fact she was driving an uninsured silver Subaru. The psychological tactics quickly shifted from fabricated maternal grief to absolute raw hostility. Helen threatened to publicly expose my supposed deep emotional cruelty on her social media platforms. She promised to tell our entire extended family that I was financially abusing her out of pure spite. Robert followed her emotional barrage with a poorly drafted legal ultimatum. He sent a heavily misspelled email claiming he was retaining a high-powered corporate litigator. He stated he would seize my personal investment portfolio to cover his accumulating maritime storage fees. The Port of Los Angeles charges exactly $185 per day for a detained shipping container. His structural liability was increasing with terrifying and mathematical certainty. I monitored their frantic digital thrashing from the quiet comfort of my ergonomic office chair. They were desperately pulling levers on a massive control panel that was completely disconnected from the power grid. I did not answer a single phone call or acknowledge a single hostile email. I merely exported the incoming server logs and the aggressive voicemails into a highly secure and encrypted digital archive. I maintained a highly organized digital directory of their escalating panic. I was calmly watching a deeply flawed supply chain finally collapse under its own unsustainable weight. I needed irrefutable proof to finalize the total structural collapse of their shared delusion. I opened my encrypted local server and accessed the archived daily system logs. I maintained these massive enterprise resource planning databases for the past 2 years. I isolated the raw transaction data originating from Robert and his supposed international vendors. I ran a custom-structured query language script to easily filter out standard operational overhead. I specifically targeted the vulnerable international procurement module. I decrypted the encrypted supplier payloads using the specific root security certificates I previously installed. The extracted data formed a mathematically perfect timeline of his corporate fraud. I exported a massive relational database containing exactly 214 discrete financial anomalies. The deep logs detailed his specific requests for direct cash transfers to unseen phantom suppliers. Phantom suppliers are simply fake shell companies created to quickly launder money out of a legitimate business. I cross-referenced the communication timestamps with the financial data from my automated clearing house ledger. I found 42 distinct instances where my collateral backing was secretly leveraged to secure personal loans. He was actively using my pristine corporate credit rating to subsidize his highly luxurious lifestyle. My mother was definitely not a passive victim in this specific financial equation. I accessed the master email archive I preserved from her holistic consulting domain. I searched the global inbox for keywords directly related to Robert and his offshore accounts. I discovered a hidden folder containing forwarded banking alerts from a secret secondary checking account. She knew about the massive historical deficit a full year before her theatrical desert departure. She actively helped him conceal the financial drain by shifting blame onto my rigid logistics systems. She knowingly sacrificed my professional stability to protect her fragile romantic delusion from public scrutiny. I compiled this massive cache of evidence into a secure and immutable digital ledger. I utilized a hashing algorithm to generate a unique cryptographic signature for every single receipt. This specific security protocol guaranteed the data could never be altered or dismissed as a fabrication. I categorized the extensive financial fraud and the deliberate emotional manipulation into a deeply detailed forensic dossier. I attached the raw hexadecimal data dumps as a supporting appendix for absolute clarity. The administrative trap was now fully armed and completely inescapable. I possessed the exact banking routing numbers used to launder my collateral into his private accounts. They believed they could threaten me into submission by leveraging a fabricated maternal authority. They did not understand they were actively challenging a data analyst to a war of pure information. I printed 3 physical copies of the forensic dossier on heavy bond paper. The laser printer hummed quietly in the corner of my dark apartment. I carefully organized the printed document pages into 3 separate manila folders. I labeled each folder with a serialized identification number to track the chain of custody. The trap was perfectly set and waiting for them to make a desperate move. The ambush occurred on Tuesday at exactly 4:30 p.m. I walked into the granite lobby of my corporate headquarters. Helen and Robert were waiting near the secure employee turnstiles. They bypassed the external building security by closely following a delivery courier inside. This is a physical security breach known as tailgating. It is a highly effective and unauthorized method of entry. Helen approached me with a manufactured expression of deep maternal affection. She wore a wrinkled linen tunic smelling of cheap patchouli oil. She reached out to embrace me in a performative display. I stepped backward exactly 2 feet to maintain a neutral physical perimeter. Her eyes flashed with unfiltered rage before the spiritual mask returned. Robert stepped forward and projected an aura of benevolent brotherhood. He told me he was entirely willing to forgive my sudden administrative lapse. He said creative visionaries and technical architects often experience minor communication friction. He suggested we go upstairs to my office and reset the server configurations together. He called it a beautiful synergy and a fresh start for our collective enterprise. He was sweating profusely through his expensive organic cotton shirt. The ambient temperature in the massive corporate lobby was a heavily regulated 60 degrees. His active perspiration was a direct physiological response to his extreme financial terror. He was completely terrified of his rapidly accumulating maritime storage fees. Helen produced a small woven basket containing 3 polished rose quartz crystals. She said she brought the heavy stones to realign my damaged corporate chakras. I do not use healing crystals due to a heavy reliance on empirical data. She lived off my automated payroll deductions for 7 full years. She never bothered to retain this basic psychological baseline. They were not offering a genuine and heartfelt familial truce. They were deploying a rudimentary social engineering attack in the physical world. They wanted to extract my administrative credentials using cheap spiritual bait. I looked at Robert and his slightly trembling hands. I looked at Helen and her perfectly calculated posture of false victimization. I realized they needed a highly public venue to fully expose their massive fraud. A private refusal in the lobby would only generate more chaotic physical intrusions. I needed to conclude this specific operational protocol in an environment they could not control. I told them I was currently unavailable for any localized network maintenance. I kept my voice entirely flat and devoid of any emotional resonance. I suggested we meet for lunch tomorrow at the Capitol Grill downtown. It was their favorite restaurant for projecting a fabricated aura of wealth. Robert exhaled sharply and eagerly agreed to the specific time and location. He believed his pathetic display of corporate grace had worked perfectly. He thought his automated financial utility was finally coming back online. I watched them walk back out into the sweltering Texas heat. They climbed into the uninsured Subaru parked illegally in a loading zone. I went upstairs and checked the precise status of my 3 manila folders. I arrived at the Capitol Grill at exactly 12:15 p.m. on Wednesday. The spacious dining room hummed with the quiet clatter of expensive silverware and high-level corporate negotiations. Helen and Robert occupied a prominent curved leather booth near the exact center of the restaurant. They were drinking expensive sparkling water infused with freshly cut organic cucumber slices. Robert smiled widely when I approached the heavy mahogany table. He genuinely believed I was there to instantly reboot his completely dead logistics empire. I did not sit down on the plush leather seating. I placed the 3 serialized manila folders perfectly parallel to the edge of his silver butter knife. Robert asked me if those were the new system routing configurations. His voice carried a heavy tone of forced entrepreneurial confidence. I opened folder 1 and slid a printed spreadsheet directly over his expensive bread plate. It detailed exactly 40 distinct automated clearing-house transfers to his hidden phantom suppliers. The total amounted to a massive $68,450 in completely unsecured personal loans. I pointed to the specific shell companies he actively used to launder my corporate collateral. Robert stopped smiling instantly. His artificial tan could not hide the sudden and dramatic loss of blood to his face. Helen tried to reach across the table to physically grab my left wrist. Have you ever watched a carefully constructed illusion completely shatter in a crowded public room? The blast radius of absolute truth is always mathematically precise and highly destructive. I stepped back to maintain my physical perimeter and kept my voice entirely flat. I wanted the surrounding corporate executives to capture my acoustic data perfectly. I opened folder 2 and carefully extracted the massive maritime logistics reports. I placed the $185, $0 daily port storage fee notices directly on top of her leather menu. I read aloud the exact banking, routing numbers he used to siphon my financial backing. I matched them to the exact dates Helen claimed she was experiencing profound spiritual poverty. She sat perfectly still, while the illusion of her holistic wellness evaporated into raw hexadecimal data. The senior vice presidents at the adjacent table stopped talking completely. They were actively eavesdropping on our deeply catastrophic and very public supply chain failure. Helen began to weep loudly. It was a highly tactical deployment of moisture designed to solicit immediate public sympathy. I immediately countered her emotional escalation with a final and utterly undeniable fact. I produced the Department of Motor Vehicles suspension notice directly from folder 3. I informed the entire room she was currently operating an uninsured and entirely unregistered vehicle. I explained the severe legal liability she created by driving it across state lines. I did not yell or break my calm operational protocol. I simply delivered the compiled forensic dossier with the cold mechanical efficiency of a database query. Robert stood up and aggressively knocked his crystal water glass onto the hardwood floor. He loudly demanded I leave the expensive restaurant immediately. I turned and walked away. The systemic collapse of their fraudulent business enterprise took exactly 11 long days. The commercial banking sector operates with a ruthless and mechanical efficiency when massive unsecured corporate loans are publicly exposed. Robert received a formal legal notice of immediate loan acceleration on early Friday morning. The financial institution demanded a total repayment of $114,890, $22 in exactly 3 days. He completely failed to produce the required corporate liquidity. The bank immediately froze all of his localized business accounts and initiated asset seizure protocols. His 4 detained shipping containers at the port of Los Angeles reached their maximum allowable storage limit. The Maritime Logistics Authority auctioned the organic bamboo inventory to a wholesale liquidator for pennies on the dollar. The total accumulated daily storage fees amounted to exactly $3,885. Before the final liquidation, his visionary yoga studio franchise was permanently dissolved before a single bamboo mat was ever unrolled. He fled back to Taos and abandoned his entire digital infrastructure. Helen experienced her own highly predictable and catastrophic localized failure. She attempted to drive the silver Subaru Outback back to her supposed spiritual haven in Sedona. A highway patrol automated license plate reader flagged the suspended registration on Interstate 40 near Flagstaff. The state trooper pulled her over and immediately impounded the uninsured vehicle on the side of the dusty highway. She was left standing on the hot asphalt with her 2 oversized leather suitcases. Robert refused to answer her frantic phone calls from the desolate roadside. He possessed absolutely no interest in subsidizing her holistic lifestyle without my unlimited corporate collateral backing them both. I carefully monitored the cascading logistical failure through publicly accessible municipal court records. I did not illegally access their private networks to watch their fragile empire burn. I simply observed the standard operating procedures of a massive systemic financial ruin. The county clerk filed a public commercial lien against Robert on Thursday afternoon. The heavy legal document was completely accessible to anyone with a basic internet connection. Their carefully curated illusion of spiritual and financial superiority was officially dead. They were drowning in a vast ocean of their own profound logistical incompetence. I permanently archived the public commercial foreclosure notice in my encrypted external storage drive. The structural demolition was mathematically perfect. I closed the main browser window and cleared my active system cache. The corrupted user files were deleted. My operating system was fully optimized. I woke up on a perfectly clear Sunday morning to the silent hum of my optimized apartment. My primary investment portfolio reflected a newly injected surplus of precisely $18,450. This was the exact historical capital I previously allocated to subsidize their chaotic existence. I achieved a state of absolute mathematical asymmetry. I poured a single cup of imported espresso and opened my logistics dashboard. My enterprise resource planning software loaded in 0.4 seconds without a single parasitic system drain. The ambient temperature in my living room was locked at a highly efficient 68 degrees. I did not have to monitor a secondary vehicle tracker or audit a fraudulent international freight invoice. My baseline psychological processor usage dropped back to a mathematically perfect idle state. The crushing operational latency of their emotional manipulation was permanently deleted from my network. I finally possessed the pure bandwidth to scale my own internal architecture. I was no longer a hijacked server, actively processing a massive overflow of fabricated spiritual grief. I was simply an analyst enjoying his coffee in a highly secure environment. Do you know the absolute fastest way to destroy a perfectly calibrated supply chain? You deliberately introduce a human variable that continuously demands infinite resources without generating a single unit of measurable value. I permanently revoked their unauthorized access and watched their unsupported inventory instantly collapse to zero. I closed out the final active ticket in my mental queue. I permanently deleted the highly corrupted vendor profiles directly from my internal local storage array. The comprehensive and deeply complex system migration was completely successful. My daily operational logistics are now running flawlessly on a clean installation. I am finally existing entirely in a state of absolute and completely undisturbed peace.